Hello everyone. So today we're going to talk about teaching strategies for independent learning in the general education classroom. My name is Jason Yates. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so to begin with, we want to encourage self-awareness, self-advocacy, and self-determination. So a student might not know their strengths and weaknesses. This would fall under the self-awareness. It's not just focused on content knowledge alone. It could be organizational skills, time management, interacting with others, even being somewhere on time, which fall under time management. As educators, we can help students to focus on their strengths and weaknesses by encouraging them to participate in typical classroom functions. We need to help them become more aware on their own by showing them examples of how things should be, what should be done, and what not to do. Even as far as going as how to act if we're talking about someone with autism. So we can do this through visual aids, through videos, interactive programs, teacher-student tutoring, student-to-student tutoring. Next we'll move on to self-advocacy. Once a student has the ability to become aware of their needs, they need to learn to ask for help. And that's all that advocacy is. It's asking for help. And that's without having to be told to do so. So we can encourage the entire class as a whole to come together and define the moments that we need to ask for help, things like that. A student with disabilities may be a little bit harder because they might not know when they need help, which is what we're here to learn to do. Again, it's lead by example, show examples, repetition is key. The more they see it, the more they'll understand when they would need help, they come to an issue where they need that help. We can also develop an IEP that focuses just on teaching the self-advocacy. We could get other faculty members involved as well as parents when it comes to learning to self-advocate like this. We'll go on to self-determination, which is if we know a student struggles in a subject, then we can help them through a series of learning strategies for improvement. And once a student realizes they need help, they can learn from that point forward. No matter how many steps it takes to get there, it may take a student a lot more steps than another student to get there, depending on the severity of their disability, of their learning disability. But if we set these small goals, once they reach these small goals, we should see an improvement. And by that point, they'll want to set higher goals. We can reward students with certain activities they're allowed to do, maybe a certain seating arrangement they prefer or a topic they want to learn about for completing these goals. Another way to get students involved in meeting goals is to get them involved in sports or extracurricular activities. So the schoolwork might not interest them. We might not be able to get them to understand setting personal goals. But once we get them involved in sports, it may be something that they take to. We are to effectively teach independent learning strategies. So as a teacher, I need to be able to determine the skill area where my students are lacking. And next, I would determine what outcomes I would expect from that strategy. Then I can create a list of steps that I feel that they would need to use and help in order to master the skill that I'm requiring of them, or the one that they're lacking in. Have to keep in mind when we do this, steps should be limited so we don't overwhelm the student, and also make it easy to memorize. We don't have to rely on memorization. Keep that in mind, that we can always have it written down. We can have it posted somewhere, the steps. It needs to be very detailed and specific in nature, so when we state the actions to complete, they know that this is exactly what they should do at this step, going to the next one. We need to think about the pre-skills required when we're talking about teaching a strategy. Do they have the basic prerequisite skills necessary to do the steps we're asking them to do? So keep that in mind. We can begin teaching independent strategies as a large group because we're not teaching the individual. We're just teaching how to individually, teaching to learn the individual strategy. So we can teach that as a whole. And then if need to be reinforced, we can do that on an individual basis dependent upon. So, because it may be necessary to give individual instruction when teaching the strategies. Maybe more effective again, we bring in tutors, we bring in parents, special ed teacher, or a para, maybe someone they connect with better. They have a different teaching style that's more appropriate. We can monitor the progress of the effectiveness of the strategy through tests or competency expectations. We can post our strategy in the class and review it as often as necessary as well. So when we go on to the strategies, let's talk about word identification and a reading fluent strategy. With this, we can break words apart and put them back together. Begin by circling prefixes, suffixes, underline vowels, the sounds, have them say the sounds, have them say the parts slowly, have them say the parts fast, and try to join the two together to make the word. This is one strategy we can use. So if we look at the word mistake, we're most likely going to know the word take. They put that in. Is it a miss? Is it a miss? They'll figure that out when they're going to say it. It's going to, once they get to saying it, they'll figure out the sound that it should be. That's one vocabulary strategy right there, or word identification strategy. And we can do these in between other activities. When we're putting our backpacks away, we're getting stuff out, we can always have something like this, a word on the board, and have people practice saying it. If we move on to vocabulary strategy, some students have difficulty remembering words and sounds, or both words, compound words. We can introduce new sounds as teachers and then ask for them to be repeated. We can introduce multiple sets and randomly ask for sounds to be pronounced. When a mistake is made, we need to correct it immediately as part of the learning strategy for this. When learning sounds and morpheme, we need to make sure students know the root word. That's imperative. And then, as we just stated prior, we'll have them break the word apart. We can also have them, with this strategy, look at the sentence around them and determine what makes sense and what doesn't at that point. So again, visual aids are the key. We can have posters, we can have videos, anything to help them remember. So if we move on to reading comprehension, we'll look at the scroll strategy. There's 5 steps. Survey the headings, reflect on the headings, because we can determine what we already know just by looking at that at the topic if it's stated in there. Connect is used to find relative information between the headings, how they connect. Suggested to write down the keywords from the headings. R's read is used to identify information that may be important in relation to the heading. Write down the ideas again and don't continue until you understand them. Highlighting is also suggested. We can use the outline to create the main ideas that there, and then we'll look back and make sure the information is correct and verify with that. So if we move on to listening and note-taking strategy, so not only are students with disabilities going to benefit from note-taking strategies, all students can become more successful with this. I'm going to discuss the tassel strategy, and most related to my daughter's experience. Begin with try not to doodle. That's imperative. My daughter had an issue with this. Arrive prepared, sit up front, sit away from friends, end daydreaming, and look at the teacher. All things that both my 3rd and 5th grader have struggled with. So those strategies alone would have helped them greatly, I believe. When students perform these actions, they can't help but pay attention, and that's the purpose here. Limiting distractions, I believe, is the best practice for students with disabilities, and that's how I plan on doing to keep my students focused. When we look at writing strategies, we have POW and TREE. They're used for the writing strategies. POW can be used for anything, and they decide that TREE is more useful for persuasive writing. So TREE is topic, sentence, and what you believe. R is the reasons, tell you why you believe this. E explains the reasons. So you say more about each reason. Because again, this is persuasive. Lastly, E is ending. These acronyms can be written down or posted in the classroom. So if we look at tree, we could have the acronym and then broken down. How is simple. Pick your idea, organize your notes, and write. Very simple. Problem solving in math. We'll jump forward here. I'm getting close on time. A technique used to teach students with disabilities is the STAR strategy. Search the word problem, write down, translate the word problem into an equation. A is answer the problem, and R is review the solution and check for the correct answer. When we take away the manipulatives, we want them to think abstractly. So no more blocks, no more physical things. But what we can do is when they read the problem, they write down the information, they underline a word such as less or more, less than, more than, and then if necessary, they can, from their mind, draw their blocks. As long as they have the information underlined and they know where to pull that information, I believe that's a good learning strategy there. So what I'm doing now is managing time and resources, and hopefully I'll make this. So a strategy for this is HOPS, which is Homework, Organization, and Planning Program. It's suggested to use a checklist for binder organization, backpack, lockers. The homework section is completed by use of a planner in which students record their homework and test. And then time management helps create feasible time limits for them to finish on time accordingly. With this strategy, I feel in order to implement it properly, the teacher, special educator, parents, they're all going to have to be involved because this is going to be a rotating, repetitious activity. We can create the checklist and review it, but if they're not followed, then there's not going to be any retention strategy. That's why everyone needs to be involved. I believe we can also add a midday checklist as well to kind of break up the day and make sure once we get to that lunchtime, did we finish everything in the morning? Okay, so lastly, we're going to talk about how I'm going to ensure classroom participation with these strategies. Self-instruction, self-monitoring, self-question. As you can see here, these are all types of ensuring. So what I plan on demonstrating strategies as an initial large group demonstration, as I said in the beginning. After the initial instruction, I hope to gain some insight and by using beginner exercises, such as sample writings, and to determine if the students can use the strategy that was taught for them, and if not, demonstrate it again. And then I can pick out who needs the further individual attention. And from there, I can see what their strategies are. Is it they couldn't write? Did they have time management skills? Did they have vocabulary or reading problems? So then I know exactly which strategy to use. Can also, if they need just practice, I'm going to carve out time for that practice. And if further instruction is the answer, it'll be me, a para, or a parent, or a special education teacher, maybe even another student to pair them with. As much as possible, I'd like to make use of visual aids within the classroom. I've seen it in practice with the ch and the morphemes and the phonemes, and I think it works. So I also want to know the visual aids can help with students who are afraid to ask for help. So with that being said, that will create a sense of, if it's on the board already, I don't have to be embarrassed to ask, because my daughter struggled with that. She's normal, average intelligence, no disabilities, but she still struggled. She didn't want to ask because she was embarrassed. So overall, this was designed to identify strategies, how to use those strategies, how I plan on using them in the class. Thank you.